Good evening and welcome to Chasing the Facts. I'm Sam Chase, your host, and with us this evening is Lexy Lattimore, who is Chelmsford's Executive Director of the Chelmsford Center for the Arts. Did I say that correctly?
You got it.
Okay, I'm trying to get better because I usually screw up people's titles. Okay, so that's good. We're off to a good start.
We're off to a great start, Sam. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome, and we're very pleased to have you on the show. Probably should have had you on before now, but I guess late is better than never, right?
Yeah, I'm grateful to be here. Absolutely.
Well, Lexy, what we usually do, especially with a first-time guest, is we ask you to give a brief biographical sketch, whatever you want to say about yourself, and then we get into the discussion. So I'll turn it over to you.
Sounds good. And again, thank you so much for having me.
Very welcome.
Yeah, so I am born and raised in Chelmsford. I went to Byam Elementary. I went to the charter school for 2 years, Parker, and then graduated from Chelmsford High School in 2010. I went to Duke University, where I studied history with a concentration in dance, or rather I got honors in dance. I did a dance thesis. And then didn't necessarily think I would dance professionally after that. I worked in community healthcare in Boston for about 2 years, and then decided, as a dancer, it feels like you get this short window to do what you love, to be on stage in a particular way. And so I decided to move to New York and begin auditioning. I was auditioning and training like crazy and doing that New York grind, the lowly artist New York grind. And then I ended up getting a job out in Cleveland with a contemporary ballet company. And I danced with them for a while. I was in Cleveland for almost 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was dancing in the ballet company. I got to tour with them. We went to Cuba, which was one of the greatest trips I've ever taken. Dancing with professional Cuban dancers, performing all over the place. It was exhausting but exhilarating. And came back, and really gratefully, right before the pandemic, I enrolled in a grad school program and began producing my own work on the side. Actually, it was much more full-time. I just was a wild woman for doing a lot at once.
Were you still in New York at that time?
I was in Cleveland at that time.
Oh, still in Cleveland.
I was still in Cleveland, yep. So I got my master's from Case Western in social work, and I was looking at the intersection of community building, art making, particularly through movement, and healing trauma. So the way that trauma can occur in systems and in communities, particularly looking in low-income neighborhoods, and how we can utilize the arts to bring people together and to start to engage them around systemic change. So that work was really exciting, and I'm incredibly grateful. Although I was timid to leave the studio full-time, I'm incredibly grateful that I did, because we were in lockdown, and so many dancers were out of work completely, had to be home. I did join the ranks of, taking classes from my living room and all of that, but I was able to still balance that with the consulting work that I was doing for the city of Cleveland, for some of the foundations out there. And that almost brings us up to timeline of me moving back out here after graduation to be closer to family. I thought I would end up back in New York, and then this opportunity to consider working for the town as the executive director of the CCA came up, and I said, this could be great. Why not? Why not try? And here we are.
Great. How did you hear about the job?
Oh, that's a good question. My mom actually served on the board of the Chelmsford Center for the Arts many years ago. So she and Susan Gates have worked together, and I learned that Susan was retiring from my mom. I wasn't sure what was going to happen with the CCA, but once I was back in town, I learned that they were posting for an executive director position, and thought it would be worth it to apply, to at least throw my hat in the ring.
And you were hired, and I'm not even going to pretend that I know much about this field, but just from what you've just told us about your background, your professional background, and of course I think the icing on the cake is that you're a Chelmsford native.
Born and raised.
You're not a blow-in,
No.
as they say, right?
No, rooted.
That's an absolute plus. Anytime you can hire a native Chelmsford for a town job is, I think most people consider that a plus. So yeah, and certainly you sound supremely qualified, and you're obviously a relatively young person, and don't, you know, by my standard, you have to know I'm 76, so everybody's young. But I mean, you're a young person, but you have it sounds like a wealth of experience that you've accumulated in such a short period of time. So I think we were lucky to get you. I mean, that's the way I look at it. So anyway, well, you're here, and you are the executive director for the Chelmsford Center of the Arts. And I wonder if you would just take a minute for the audience and just give the audience a general overview of what the CCA program is and what you have been doing for the last 10 months or so of your tenure here.
Yeah. So I think that that's been the great legacy of this work, is being able to really sharpen our mission and our vision. What do we do? Why do we do it? And so our mission is to use the arts to increase the quality of life of Merrimack Valley residents and visitors. And that's really taken from the town's vision. And I've thought a lot about, you know, what is quality of life? What does that really mean? And there's this great study. It's the UK, oh, now I'm going to forget. I believe the UK Foundation, there's a foundation in the UK that did a quality of life study to really understand how people categorize quality of life, how do we talk about it? And they broke it up into these 6 categories. And 2 of them I feel like the CCA fits into really well. The town has the rest of them, frankly, very beautifully covered. Some of the examples include nature. So we have some great parks and green spaces that folks can enjoy. Health and wellness. You know, we have a whole health department. We have lots of gyms in our town. We have the ability to play sports, all of those things. Civic engagement. You know, we have a lot of civic engagement. I know from the number of folks that you have that come on your show and that engage. People are very engaged in the political space of the town and how it's run, and that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Where I think the CCA fits in is in that sense of wonder. Wonder was one of the categories, and belonging. So do people feel like there's a sense of playfulness, even as adults? Is there a place for us to come and experience something that makes us go, wow, oh, that's beautiful, oh, that's sad, oh, that made me think, or that reminded me of myself or my relationship to my parent, you know, whatever it is. I think that the CCA, above all of the other departments and areas of Chelmsford, is really, really well poised to provide that sense of wonder and that sense of belonging, that anyone in our town is welcome and can find a little bit of themselves reflected in the space. So that's like the high level kind of overarching thought there that's really shaped what our mission is. When it's boiled down, so when I started, we, as you mentioned before we started here, we're coming out of the pandemic. Lockdown was lifting and restrictions were lifting, and people were able to gather much more, you know, this time last year than the year before that in 2021. And so Susan had commissioned a strategic plan that happened in 2019. Now, the timing of that was both fantastic and tragic. Fantastic in that it provided me coming in with an incredible roadmap of how to really organize the transition of me coming into executive director. It was tragic in that many of those things never got to be enacted because the pandemic hit soon after the report was done. But in that report, it really shared that folks have a deep interest in theater in our town. They want to connect with one another meaningfully. They want more to do with their families and their children. And so all of the programming that Dan Adamski, our technical director, and I have put together throughout my tenure has been very reflective of those wants and desires. So for example, we founded a theater company called The Playground. We've put on 2 different events this fall, a murder mystery, which sold out and made a profit, which was fantastic. Oh yeah, people came out, it was super fun. Hired on a number of local artists, which was great. And then we had an alumni talent show the Saturday after Thanksgiving, which brought back alums all the way from the class of 1972, I think, all the way up to 2022, to share their artwork with with the town to share their performance. We have so many incredibly talented people that have come out of Chelmsford, that have lived here, whose parents still live here, or who still live here themselves. So giving them a platform to share what they do. I always say, you know, there are folks that I couldn't even afford to bring back to the CCA stage. That's how well they've done. One of the comedians that appeared on that talent show opened for Jay Leno. She's a superstar.
Wow.
And watching her mentor one of the younger comedians backstage was just fantastic. So that's an event that I hope will continue forward, but it's just a little taste of what we've been able to do. And the playground will produce a 10-minute play series in June. So they've been working on that committee. So the theater piece is one. I think, you know, the community piece is another. We know that people are really desiring to connect with one another in meaningful ways. So we've been able to open our doors on a weekly basis for things like trivia, where we partnered with the library to provide a space where we've had entire families come and bring snacks, and we've been able to serve wine and beer and soft drinks, and it's been a really lovely way to spend a Thursday night, all the way to our jazz brunch, which we just had in a couple weeks ago, where we partnered with our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee to throw a big event, and it was beautiful. It brought so many folks from various parts of the community, from all over the Merrimack Valley together, and featured the work of local jazz artists, as well as the work of Dwight Upchurch, who is a visual artist. So, yeah, I think that the final area that we're starting to move in the direction of is really focusing on our teenagers, looking at the map of resources in town, what demographics and what age groups that they serve. We've realized that although the high school does a fantastic job of providing a multitude of opportunities for our young people, that safety net outside of that space, places where teens can go and express themselves, is a little bit more limited. And I think that the CCA will be a fantastic space for teenagers to tell their stories.
That, you know, I'm glad you said that, and that's a thought that had not even occurred to me. But having lived in Chelmsford now for almost 45 years, I guess I have to agree with you. I mean, that's exactly right. What do the kids do after high school if they're still in the community? And many are. Okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a good point. So, and of course, you went through that. You went through the high school.
I did.
And I assume you were very active in the arts program there. So of course, you know, that the link is already there with you because you have had that experience. That's a very, very good point. One thing, I'm just going to make a comment, and you can comment on it or not as you choose.
Sure.
One of the things that disturbed me, this was before you came here, and we were having the conversation about continuing with the arts program at the CCA, because Susan Gates, as I think probably most of our viewers know, had announced her intention to retire. And Susan was the unpaid director for many, many years. So the town benefited tremendously from her volunteerism. And I always felt it was probably unreasonable for a town of this size, if we were going to have that kind of a program in place, to expect that it should be managed by an unpaid person. I never thought, I mean, if this were a community of 5,000 or 6,000 people, I'd say okay. But we happen to be the 18th largest municipality in the state, and I figure, well, if a town our size can't support a program like this, there's something wrong, because I knew that the resources were there and the desire was there just from having lived here for so many years. The problem was, in many people's minds, is whether we continue with an arts program from the standpoint of the town supporting it through its budget and so forth, got mixed in with how do we preserve the building? And that conversation got meshed, and in people's minds, CCA arts program equals keep the building. If we don't have an arts program, the building goes away. It gets rented out, it gets torn down, whatever, okay? Yeah. And I found that to be a very unfortunate discussion and also not accurate.
Yeah, no.
Because the building is a town-owned asset.
Absolutely.
And whether or not we have a CCA program or not, the town is obligated to maintain that building.
Yeah.
And that's something that people, I think, they understand it now, but at the time that was a discussion, and people were confused. And I always felt, and I remember telling certain members of the select board at the time, listen, you know, when you talk about this, please talk about it in terms of, do we support an arts program or not? Forget the building, because we have to support the building. We don't have a choice. Mm-hmm. Do you feel that that's an accurate representation of what I just said? Because I felt very strongly about that.
Totally. It is confusing.
Yes.
People do get confused, even in what is the executive director's relationship. What is the CCA's relationship to the town? All of that. It gets a little bit...
exactly.
A little muddled. And so the building is owned by the town.
Right.
The building is owned by the
town. And
town.
you're a paid employee of the town.
I am a paid employee
Right.
of the town. And so is our technical director, Dan, who is paid by the town. The town manager is the executive director's boss. It is their manager. So I have become a department head, which I've really enjoyed. It's been really great connecting with the other department heads and learning from them. It's made partnerships much more seamless because we're all at the same table and able to really swap resources that way.
Well, I think the town manager is pretty good about that in terms of managing his department heads. And
Absolutely.
making sure that people are included and they participate in the weekly meetings and so forth. that you have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so gaining access to that is, I think, been a big asset to the CCA at large. And there have been lots of questions around, I guess you're right, that the connection between the programs and
The building.
building itself. I think in having these two paid positions that are directly connected, that we've created a department in a way, it's my hope that we will be able to provide such a level of consistent resource that we become or that we function closer to the library and the senior center in terms of providing community resource and support that is certainly deeply connected with the building, but not inherent to it either, right? Like
Correct.
If God forbid something happened to either of those buildings, we would figure something out. We wouldn't let those programs die.
Well, that's the point. If something happened to the building, you would still continue in some form or fashion. And there are other spaces in town where you might be able to, at least temporarily, in other words, the programs wouldn't die is what I'm getting at.
Sure. I mean, at this point, I think the legacy that Susan has left, I mean, there are a number of ties specifically to the building. I mean, we have a beautiful light and sound system. We have a grand piano. There are certain things that there are assets that have been embedded in the space that are very specific to the Chelmsford Center for the Arts. So I'll be clear on that. I think where folks get a little bit confused is particularly in my ability to fundraise, for example.
Yes.
So because I'm a municipal employee, I cannot fundraise. I can't say, hey, Sam, you love the CCA. Give us a lollipop. I can't have you do that's a weird example, but give us $5.
No, I think that's understandable.
Yeah, that can't happen. So what I've done is I've founded the Friends of the CCA, which is a 501c3. They are able, similar to the Friends of the Library, Friends of the Senior Center, they're able to function as the fundraising arm of the CCA. What's beautiful about having the CCA kind of be a part of this municipal structure is that facilities takes amazing care of our building. We had a flood at the top of February that's been really, really challenging. And Kathleen Canavan, Brian Orso, their entire team has been phenomenal in cleaning us up and trying to get us back on track, working with contractors to replace anything that's been damaged. So these are examples in which you're like, thank God we're not a nonprofit or we're not separate from the town, because whether it's from a simple task of having someone mow the lawn and not having that be a task that I have to figure out how to schedule, to having an actual emergency and having folks that really know what they're doing, are very, very professional and very consistent. be able to handle those things, and having the information loop circle back up to Paul in a way that is professional and seamless and all of that. I think that those are the nuances that folks don't always think about, when it comes to this role being a part of a municipal structure versus a nonprofit structure. So I think that the CCA is very well equipped in this municipal context to continue to carve out a strong space for itself. I think that's what we've really done by bringing more and more people into the space. We had an open house in partnership with the health department. They allowed us to open our doors on their fall festival at the top of the season I think it was October 1st. And we welcomed 500 guests, which was phenomenal.
That is phenomenal.
Wonderful. At the same time, that really grew. By the time we opened our doors at the Prelude, we had 1,550 people come through our building.
That's amazing.
And we programmed all 3 floors. We had musicians on the top floor playing Christmas music. I was like, if you love Christmas, it's a Christmas miracle up there. Go enjoy it. We had a cultural floor on the first floor, so we had a Kwanzaa demo and a Hanukkah demo, and then a secular section, a winter wonderland on the basement floor. And the Girl Scouts who meet in our building did crafts with the kids and sold hot chocolate. So there's just a plethora of things that we can do. And again, having access to those municipal resources is huge. Being able to be on a department head call and learn that the health department was doing an open house, and having someone like Sue Rosa be very gracious with us to say, hey, yeah, of course, you should have it on the same day as our event. We can cross-promote, and it just really strengthens the fabric of what we're all trying to build as a community.
I think, you've answered one of the questions I was going to ask you, so now I don't have to ask you specifically the question, which essentially was, do you feel you've been well supported? I think in your answer that you've just given, you've indicated that you've been very well supported, and really, in a short period of time, integrated into the fabric of the town's administrative efforts and accepted. And I think that's great. And that's what I know as a citizen, as a resident of Chelmsford, that's what I was hoping for in the person coming in to take over from Susan, that that whole business of her retiring and how do we replace her and so forth. I think that brought a lot of visibility that otherwise might not have been brought.
Totally.
To this situation, so we've benefited immensely from that. So that's all good stuff. What do you feel going forward? What do you see as challenges going forward that we need to be aware of?
That's a good question. Challenges going forward.
And I've really been very intrigued with the reports that you've made to the Select Board. I think you've done it twice now, as I recall.
Yeah.
And I remember the first one. I thought, "Holy cow! She didn't waste any time. You were off and running." And then it was more of the same. I think. Yeah. With a little bit more fleshing out because you'd been here longer. All right, and we're able to accomplish some things. So, is that what we can expect to see, in terms of your perspective going forward? Is that the direction we can continue to see as far as the marketing and the outreach and so forth? I mean, that's what I've gotten from your presentations, that you're very deeply involved in not just managing today what the programs are, but looking out, seeing what is possible to bring to the community.
Totally.
That kind of perspective. So.
Yeah, I think I can answer both pieces of that. One, I think in looking forward, I feel very grateful that the Select Board has seemed very supportive of the direction that we are going in.
Good. Mm-hmm.
And all of that is deeply rooted in the strategic planning that was done before I even arrived. Mm-hmm. So I assure people, I'm like, listen, it's not just the Lexy show. And this is work that started before I got here by way of this planning and really speaking with community members on what they wanted to see. And I believe it's work that will continue long after my transition. So I'm grateful for that piece. I think that the theater program will continue to grow and blossom. I think there's plenty of space to continue to think about how can we better support our teenagers and our young people. And I think that a lot of the community events that have had a great response, I always say, the first one's the worst, in terms of the planning and you're figuring out all the logistics. Now we have a roadmap, a blueprint, a budget, things that I didn't have going in. They're all there now, so for the next person coming in, my hope is that they'll be able to really take those notes, take those things, make it their own, but carry forward the roots, if you will, the seeds. I think metaphorically, I feel like I came into a garden that had so much potential, but also overgrowth and things that needed to be weeded through and cleaned up. And I've done that. And I think in having these 3 kind of clear seed marks, okay, we want to focus on theater, we want to focus on young people, we want to focus on that community connection. There's so much breadth within each of those that someone could come in and do their thing. So I'm excited about that piece and the longevity of that. I think in terms of challenges, you mentioned that my first report, you're like, oh, that's a lot. It was a lot, and I don't move slowly. I was very gung-ho about getting things up and running.
You hit it out of the park.
Oh,
No, you did, that first report, because I think we all, I'll speak for myself.
Sure.
She hasn't been here that long. What can she tell us? I mean, that's just a reasonable expectation. You'd only been here a couple of months. And then when you stood up to make your report, it was like you'd been here for a year. I mean, that's the sense I got, the level of activity that you were talking about and the vision going forward. So it was very impressive.
Thank you. Thank you. And my hope, I think, in terms of additional support, the town has been incredibly welcoming and embraced me.
Good.
And I'm so grateful for that. I think one thing that I'm hopeful for is that we can really grow our volunteer program, that we can really invite more community members into the fold to begin to produce, because I'll be very honest, my days were quite long. And I don't expect someone coming behind me to work 12-hour days, to work more than that. You know what I'm saying? I think that we need to make sure that this is sustainable, that someone coming in is not burning out. And to do that, we just need as many hands on deck as possible. So although the town has been very, very supportive, I think as we're reaching more and more people, the next question is, how can I get involved? What talent or time can I offer? And I'm hopeful that that's the direction that we're going in to support programs going forward.
I hope so too. Well, Lexy, time goes quickly. We've got about 2 minutes left. So for those of you in the audience that don't already know it, unfortunately, Lexy, unfortunately for us, hopefully fortunately for her, Lexy has tendered her resignation, and she will be moving on to newer opportunities. And we're going to be very, very sorry to see you go. And you're here through the end of the month, is that correct?
I'm here through the end of the month.
Okay. Have you been, so I just, on behalf of the town, I want to wish you well in your new endeavors, and just express the fact that we're just very grateful that we had you, even for the short time that we had you, and you've certainly been able to accomplish far more, I think, than anybody could reasonably have expected, a newcomer walking into a situation like this. It certainly didn't hurt that you were a Chelmsford native. That helped.
Helped tremendously.
Obviously. We were very lucky. So we've got about a minute left. Do you have any thoughts on a successor? Have you been asked to participate in that process, or just, you've got about 50 seconds to tell us that?
I am not participating in that process. I trust Paul and the select board to make those choices. I think it's important. I don't know if there will be an additional thing that I'm asked to engage around, but so far my lips have been sealed, not because I'm holding some secret, but because I am waiting with bated breath like everyone else. But I just want to say a huge thank you to the town for welcoming me with open arms, for saying, all right, come on, kid, welcome home.
Welcome home.
Thank you for
welcome
being
back.
here, and welcome back. Yeah, I don't take it lightly, and I really will carry all of this forward.
Great.
So
thank you very much, Lexy. We are out of time, and we will see you later.